If you kill Americans, if you threaten Americans anywhere on Earth, we will hunt you down without apology and without hesitation, and we will kill you.
3:14 a.m. June 4th. The Strait of Hormuz. 20 minutes ago, every Iranian military radio frequency went silent. All of them, simultaneously. A signals intelligence analyst aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt filed 2 priority alerts up the chain in 18 minutes. The replies were brief. Acknowledged, continue monitoring. He is still monitoring when the radar beam hits. From a concealed position on the rocky plateau above Lavan Island, an Iranian Matla Ol-Fajr 3 mobile radar array goes active at full power. It finds its target in 1.4 seconds. The target is a U.S. Navy MQ-4C Triton high-altitude maritime surveillance drone, cruising at 52,000 feet above the Eastern Strait. A 44-foot aircraft with the wingspan of a 737, capable of watching 40,000 square miles of ocean simultaneously. It has been the U.S. military's eye over the strait for the past 6 hours. Inside a buried launch tube on the island, a Zolfaghar surface-to-air interceptor ignites. The canister cap shatters. The missile climbs at 3,600 miles per hour. The Triton's threat receiver fires automatic countermeasures. At 52,000 feet, there is nowhere to go. The Zolfaghar detonates 40 feet above the drone's fuselage. The fragmentation ring cuts through composite airframe and fuel cells simultaneously. One wing separates. The drone comes apart and falls toward the black water in pieces. The United States just lost its eye over the most critical energy choke point on the planet, and on a dirt road just inside the Iranian border. The ground is beginning to shake. 20 heavy transport trucks painted the brown-gray of commercial cargo vehicles. Their flatbeds carrying disguised mobile launcher rails pull off the road and stop. Their container roof panels retract simultaneously. 20 Zolfaghar 2 short-range ballistic missiles ignite in sequence over 8 seconds. They climb vertically on columns of white fire, accelerating to Mach 3 as they arc toward the edge of the atmosphere. Their target is Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, home to 10,000 American service members and the forward command hub for every U.S. operation in the region. But the missiles are only the first wave. From a dry riverbed 40 miles south, 50 Shahed 136 loitering munitions delta-winged suicide drones, each carrying a 50-kilogram warhead, launch in a staggered sequence. They fly low, below radar, navigating on GPS coordinates toward the same target. Unlike the ballistic missiles, which arrive in minutes, the drones fly for hours, designed to arrive precisely as U.S. defenders are already engaged with the missile interceptors. Udeid's Patriot air defense batteries detect the inbound ballistic tracks at 140 kilometers. The engagement sequence is automatic. Interceptor missiles launch, they veer off course. The first interceptor corkscrews and detonates in empty air. The second curves away from its track and slams into the desert. The third heads straight back toward the base boundary. On the tarmac at Udeid, a staff sergeant sees the streaks of failing interceptors overhead, grabs a wounded airman by the collar of his flight suit, and pulls him behind a blast barrier, pressing his own body over him as the first impacts shake the earth. The base is firing its best weapons. They are hitting nothing. Somewhere in the desert, a network of Iranian GPS spoofing transmitters is broadcasting a counterfeit GPS signal 40 times stronger than the real satellite feed. Every interceptor missile trusting GPS is now flying toward a location that does not exist. Every navigation display on the base is feeding its operators false coordinates. The Iranians have not sent a more powerful weapon, they have sent a signal. A $300,000 truck-mounted transmitter is defeating $2 million interceptor missiles. The horizon glows with 70 incoming engines, and the base defending it is blind. Think about what just happened. The most advanced air defense system in the world, built to stop ballistic missiles traveling at 3 times the speed of sound, was defeated by a radio signal. Not a railgun, not a hypersonic weapon, a signal. Does that change everything you thought you knew about what superior firepower actually means? Please note, this scenario is entirely hypothetical, built for military history education and entertainment. All systems and tactics referenced are based on publicly available information. The base is blind. Its defenses are firing at ghosts, and 600 miles to the south, the carrier strike group is about to discover the GPS jamming is only the second trap Iran set tonight. Drop a 1 inch in the comments if you want to see how America fights back, or a 2 inches if this is where you stop. Let's find out who's still with me. 3:31 a.m. The USS Theodore Roosevelt is moving south at 28 knots, 100,000 tons of steel, nuclear-powered, carrying 80 aircraft and 5,000 sailors. Her sonar arrays can detect a submarine's engine noise from 60 miles away in ideal conditions. Tonight, conditions are not ideal. The GPS jamming degrading base defenses in Qatar is also elevating the electronic noise floor across the region, including inside the acoustic processing systems on the carrier's escort destroyers. The sonar picture is cluttered. The operators are working harder than normal to separate real contacts from electronic artifacts. The Nahang-class submarine has been designed around exactly this vulnerability. It is small, 330 tons, barely longer than 2 school buses end-to-end, which means its acoustic signature under battery power is almost nothing. It has been sitting motionless on the sandy seafloor, 35 meters below the surface for 72 hours, running on residual battery charge. Crew breathing recycled air in near-total silence, rationing water, waiting with the absolute patience of a weapon that knows its target's course and speed and has done the math. The carrier has been moving in a straight line at constant speed, a deliberate diplomatic posture signaling non-aggression during the current ceasefire negotiations. Predictable is the one thing a small submarine needs. At 3:31 a.m., the Nahang moves, just slightly, just enough to crack open a torpedo tube outer door. The sound of that metal hatch, a single mechanical click transmitted through water, is unmistakable to a trained sonar operator. The alarm on the destroyer USS Momsen triggers immediately. But it's not the torpedo that creates the crisis, it's the geometry. The sub is 8 miles from the carrier's bow. At this range, a torpedo can reach the carrier in under 4 minutes. The strike group's destroyers cannot use depth charges. The Nahang is positioned within the carrier's own turn radius. A detonation at that depth and distance risks shock damage to the carrier's hull and drive systems. The U.S. Navy is holding a $13 billion ship and 5,000 lives against a submarine that cost less than a single F/A-18 Super Hornet. And back in the air above the strait, the second trap is sprung. 2 F-35C Lightning IIs have been orbiting over the Iranian coastline at 28,000 feet. Invisible, weapons ready, tasked with destroying the Lavan Island radar site before the next missile salvo. They arrive over the city of Bandar Abbas and immediately face an order they cannot execute. The Iranian radar system is not in a military compound. The mobile radar trucks are parked inside standard orange and blue shipping containers stacked on a civilian cargo pier, adjacent to a Red Crescent medical supply vessel currently offloading humanitarian aid. The radar equipment is invisible from the air except by its electronic emissions. The moment the F-35Cs fire into that pier, they risk the medical vessel, the dock workers, the aid cargo. Iran is not betting on military power here. It is betting on American conscience. The F-35Cs orbit, invisible, fully armed, unable to pull the trigger. Every second they circle, that radar signal is reaching the Shahed drones heading for Udeid. I want you to sit with that for a moment. If you were the strike package commander circling above that port right now, capable of ending this with a single weapons release, what would you do? The radar has to be destroyed. The medical ship is right there. What is the call? 3:44 a.m. The EA-18G Growler was not sent to find the radar by sight. It was sent to find it by listening. The Growler pilot has not fired a single weapon. He has been flying a slow racetrack orbit 30 miles offshore. His AN/ALQ-99 jamming pod running in passive detection mode, not transmitting, just listening. The GPS spoofing network that is wrecking U.S. interceptors across the theater is transmitting a powerful continuous signal. Powerful signals are loud. To the Growler's sensor suite, that jamming transmitter is broadcasting like a foghorn in an empty room. The Growler locates the GPS spoofing source in 4 minutes and 22 seconds. It feeds the coordinates to the strike network. An F/A-18E Super Hornet, 40 miles offshore, releases a GBU-53 Theodore Stormbreaker glide bomb, 250 pounds, no engine, no radar signature, gliding silently toward a GPS coordinate on a desert road. The hardened penetrating warhead enters the armored transmitter vehicle through the roof and detonates inside. The false GPS signal dies in a single burst of static. Across the theater, every navigation system and weapons computer that has been navigating toward phantom coordinates snaps back to reality within 2 seconds. The Patriot batteries at Al Udeid receive a corrected GPS fix and retask their active interceptors mid-flight. The missiles stop chasing ghosts and start chasing actual ballistic tracks. Now the Growler turns to the radar containers at Bandar Abbas port. This is where the AGM-88E Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missile earns its reputation in a single engagement. The Iranian radar has been transmitting in brief pulses, just long enough to refresh the Shahed drone guidance, then going silent before a traditional HARM missile can get a lock. But the AGM-88E doesn't need a continuous signal, it needs a single pulse and a fraction of a second. The moment that radar transmits, the missile memorizes the GPS coordinates of the container it came from, not the frequency, the location. The Growler gets one pulse. The Iranian commander cuts power 1.8 seconds later. He believes he is safe. The AGM-88E is already falling. It navigates the final 14 miles on stored GPS memory. No radar signal required. No emissions to follow, and hits the orange shipping container at Pier 7 of Bandar Abbas commercial port with precision that a sniper would envy. The focused warhead is engineered to direct its blast inward, shredding the radar equipment while containing the overpressure to the container's own walls. The medical vessel 80 meters away rocks in the shockwave. Its crew grabs handrails. No one is injured. No hull is breached. The radar fence over the Strait of Hormuz is unzipped. At Al Udeid, everything changes in under 60 seconds. The SM-2 extended range interceptors, now flying toward accurate GPS coordinates, begin connecting with Zolfaghar 2 ballistic missiles at 85,000 feet, converting them to expanding clouds of aluminum vapor and unburned propellant above the Qatari desert. The APKWS system, the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, a laser guidance kit bolted onto a Cold War unguided rocket, begins sweeping the Shahed drone swarm. Laser designators on the base perimeter track, one drone at a time. APKWS rockets launch in pairs, at $25,000 per shot against a $20,000 drone. The economics finally make sense. Within 3 minutes, 31 of the 50 drones are gone. The few Shaheds that break through the rocket screen meet the base's last line of defense, the Phalanx CIWS. A radar-guided 20mm rotary cannon spinning at 4,500 rounds per minute, a physical wall of steel that any drone flying into it simply ceases to exist. 3 more drones are destroyed in the final 200 meters, 4 reach the perimeter fence, 2 aircraft shelters are damaged, 6 service members are treated for blast concussion. No aircraft are destroyed. Al Udeid is battered. Al Udeid is standing. Iran threw 20 ballistic missiles and 50 drones at the largest U.S. base in the Middle East. Now for the submarine. A U.S. Navy P-8, a Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, arrives over the carrier strike group and drops a pattern of 24 sonobuoys in a 1-mile ring around the Nahang's last known position. The sonobuoys create an acoustic net, a circle of underwater microphones, each one feeding data to the Poseidon's sensor display in real time. The Nahang's crew realizes what's happening. Every course change, every system activation, every RPM fluctuation from their electric motor is being logged. They are now the center of an acoustic prison with no exits. The destroyer USS Momsen positions directly above the submarine's depth, not to destroy it, to communicate. A low-frequency active sonar pulse, the kind that physically reverberates through a submarine's pressure hull like a cathedral bell, fires downward at intervals, measured, deliberate, inescapable. Then the USS Momsen sends a direct acoustic signal, a simple message broadcast at close range into the water above the Nahang's conning tower. Surface immediately or be destroyed. The Nahang's batteries are at 12%. The crew has been breathing recycled air for 72 hours. The sonobuoy net has removed every viable escape route. The sonar pulses are hammering the hull every 30 seconds. A small black conning tower breaks the surface 600 yards off the carrier's port beam. The crew emerges into the morning darkness with their hands visible. The U.S. never fired a single torpedo. What defeated the submarine was not superior firepower. It was the certainty, delivered through geometry, sonobuoys, and acoustic pressure, that continuing was a death sentence with no possible alternative. The threat that could have killed a $13 billion carrier was turned into a floating metal box in the center of a strike group. And over the horizon, something new appears on the carrier's radar. 30 Sina-class fast attack boats are pouring from coastal inlets at 55 knots. The IRGC's final act, ordered by commanders who are watching the entire battle collapse and deciding that speed and quantity might still accomplish what technology has failed to deliver. Each boat carries a short-range anti-ship missile and a crew willing to close to 500 yards. They spread across a 4-mile front, trying to overwhelm the carrier's point defenses through sheer volume. The carrier doesn't move its main guns. 4 MH-60R Seahawks helicopters lift from the carrier's flight deck and climb to 200 feet, hovering 3 miles from the approaching formation beyond the maximum range of anything the fast attack boats carry. The pilots lock AGM-114R Hellfire missiles onto the lead vessels using FLIR targeting systems. No drama, no ceremony. The first salvo of Hellfires drops. 6 lead boats are gone in 58 seconds. Fiberglass hulls, outboard motors, and crew erased from the surface of the water in a sequence of orange fireballs and collapsing white wakes. The boats behind them see what's happening. The formation loses coherence. The survivors turn. Within 4 minutes of the first launch, every surviving Sinca boat is running for the coastline at maximum throttle. 30 boats went out. 14 will make it back. By 5:19 a.m. on June 4th, the Persian Gulf belongs to the United States Navy. Before you go, one thing about the AGM-114 Hellfire that almost nobody talks about. Everyone knows it as a precision tank killer. You've seen the footage. A laser dot, a smoke trail, a vehicle that ceases to exist. The kill chain looks almost calm from the outside, which is precisely what makes it terrifying. The name itself is the clue. Hellfire is an acronym. Helicopter-launched fire and forget. The fire and forget designation means the launching aircraft doesn't need to remain pointed at the target after release. The missile chases the laser independently. The helicopter can break away the moment the weapon leaves the rail, reducing its exposure to ground fire to the absolute minimum. But here is the origin almost no one mentions. When the Hellfire program was first conceived in the late 1970s, the original engineering requirement was not to destroy armored vehicles at all. The U.S. Army wanted a helicopter-borne system to clear dense jungle, heavy brush, and natural obstacles to cut movement corridors through terrain that would otherwise pin down a ground advance. The first specification documents described it as a demolition tool. The engineers working the initial design were essentially drawing blueprints for a very fast, very precise chainsaw with wings. The combat role came later, and when it arrived, it changed warfare. Tonight, over the Persian Gulf, the weapon designed to clear jungle cleared 18 fast attack boats from the surface of the ocean in under 4 minutes. The engineers who wrote the first specification probably couldn't have imagined that scenario. But that is what American military development looks like in practice. You build something capable enough to solve the problem in front of you, and you build it well enough that it solves problems you haven't faced yet. America didn't win tonight because it had the biggest weapons. The Iranians had ballistic missiles. They had submarine-launched torpedoes. They had a drone swarm designed to overwhelm automated defenses. By raw numbers, the opening salvo was theirs. America won because it had the most adaptable weapons, and the pilots, sailors, and analysts behind them who knew how to think faster than the enemy planned. The GPS jammer that blinded U.S. missiles became a beacon for a Growler operator who knew how to listen. The radar that hid inside a civilian shipping container became a stored GPS coordinate from a single 1.8-second transmission. The submarine that survived 72 hours underwater undetected was defeated not by a torpedo, but by a ring of sonobuoys and a radio message. The fast attack swarm that could outrun a destroyer couldn't outrun a helicopter 3 miles away. Every trap Iran built tonight was constructed on one assumption, that American weapons can only do what they were originally designed for. That assumption cost them the fight before the first shot was fired. Here's what I want you to think about. America's GPS jamming was defeated by a Growler that was listening instead of transmitting. Does that mean the more powerful an enemy's electronic warfare, the more of a target it becomes for the side that knows how to find the noise? Drop your answer below, I want to read every one. And here's the bigger question. Iran used a medical supply vessel as a human shield for a radar system tonight. The F-35Cs couldn't fire, not because they lacked the capability, but because American rules of engagement protected that ship. Does that restraint make America stronger or more vulnerable in the next conflict? Let us know in the comments.